Hey everyone, welcome to Professor Long's Lectures in Anatomy and Physiology. I'm Professor Bob Long. That was a continuation. This video is a continuation of my endocrine series on the simple endocrine reflexes. If you're watching these videos, you're either enrolled in my class, so these videos are intended for you to learn for my exams, to set the foundation for more understanding in the future. If you're not in my class and you find these helpful, great, but know that your instructor may go into different levels of breadth and depth and detail than I cover, so this does not suffice, should not replace your own instructor's instruction. But these videos are for my students. If anyone else finds them helpful, great, use them. So we've been doing the endocrine lectures. This is going to be the second endocrine video on the simple endocrine reflexes. The simple endocrine reflexes have an endocrine organ somewhere in the body. We just did insulin and glucagon. The endocrine organ is the pancreas. It happens to be the pancreatic islets. So they're not even involving the brain and the hypothalamus. Now we're going to do two hormones that are also considered antagonists. In the last video we said that agonists have the same action, antagonists have opposite actions. If one raises your blood sugar, the other one lowers it. The first hormone we're going to do is called calcitonin. Calcitonin, as you can imagine, has some effect on calcium balance. Calcium balance is really important. As you know, calcium plays a major role in the release of neurotransmitters at synaptic knobs. If I have too much calcium, some might leak in too rapidly and cause too much neurotransmitter release. If I don't have enough calcium, when I open the channels, I may not release enough neurotransmitters. So they can affect neuronal function, they can affect the calcium in skeletal muscle and cardiac muscle. So calcium plays a very important role in skeletal, smooth, and cardiac muscle, in the nervous system, and in some other areas of the body. So calcium balance is super important. So we're going to start with calcitonin, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it. I always like to use these funny sayings as I tell my students. I'm not all that smart, so I have to simplify things and think of easier ways to remember them. When I was a kid, if we were being really loud and rowdy in our bedroom, my dad would knock on the door or bang on a wall and say, hey, tone it down in there. To tone something down means you lower it. So I always thought, well, calcitonin tones calcium ions down. And that's how I remember what it does. Calcitonin tones calcium down. It lowers calcium levels. Well, that tells us a lot about it. Calcium, the stimulus for this hormone release, is an elevated concentration of calcium ions in our blood. Now, as you guys know, I developed my own shorthand when I was a student. I've talked about this before. This means a high concentration of calcium in your blood. You've eaten a whole lot of cheese and cottage cheese and drinking milk and yogurts. You're taking in way too much calcium, okay? If we flood our body with calcium, it can short circuit neurons, it can short circuit muscle cells, it can cause heart attacks and cramping and fogginess and headaches and all sorts of things. So the endocrine organ that releases calcitonin is going to be the thyroid gland. And the cells in our thyroid gland are called parafollicular cells of the thyroid. So if you remember when we did the anatomy of the thyroid gland in lab, we had these little round bundles of tissue called thyroid follicles filled with a substance called colloid, where we stored the thyroid hormones, thyroxine, T3, T4. But if I look at all of those little thyroid follicles, occasionally there's some cells outside of those thyroid follicles called parafollicular cells, sometimes also referred to as C cells, like the letter C. Those parafollicular cells are monitoring calcium levels, and they can release the hormone calcitonin. So it is the parafollicular cells, your thyroid gland is the endocrine organ, and particularly the parafollicular cells of the thyroid will release calcitonin. And calcitonin, by the way, is very often abbreviated as CT. Okay? The target for calcitonin, well, if I have too much calcium in my blood, what do I need to do? Got to lower it. One way to lower it is to urinate it out, to just pee it out of the body. But another way is to store it where we store a lot of calcium. And the number one place we store calcium, the number one calcium reservoir in the body, is our bones. So the target for calcitonin is going to be bones and the kidneys. The response is going to be to lower the concentration of calcium in our blood. How do we do that? At bones, calcitonin stimulates what we call osteogenesis. Or we can say that it will increase osteoblast activity, which is osteogenesis. Osteoblasts in our bone have receptors for the hormone calcitonin. When calcitonin binds to them, they start taking calcium out of our blood and packing it into bones, making our bones thicker and stronger and healthier. We call that osteogenesis, the generation or making of bone. Okay? And at kidneys, it can increase calcium loss in urine. So if you had a patient and you were doing a urinalysis on them and they have a certain concentration of calcium in their blood and you inject calcitonin into their body, you can see that the calcium concentrations in their blood will become elevated. So anyway, that's what you need to know about calcitonin. The stimulus is elevated blood calcium levels. The parafollicular cells of our thyroid gland detect that and release the hormone calcitonin. Calcitonin will target our bones and our kidneys. It will lower the calcium concentration in our blood by stimulating osteogenesis in bone or increasing osteoblast activity. And at the kidneys, it will increase calcium loss in urine. It makes the kidneys more permeable to calcium. We'll get into the detail of that when we do the urinary system. Okay, so know the steps, know the hormone. Now, the next hormone in the list of things to, or not the list of things to know in my note set, if you want to switch over to page 31, we were just now on page 30. On page 31, by the way, my note set is always blank. Students often want to see my notes in class. Can I copy your notes? No, they're blank. We're going to do parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone is abbreviated as PTH. Now, if I tell you, based on the language that we've learned before, the vocabulary, if I tell you that calcitonin and parathyroid hormones are antagonists, that means they have opposite effects, then you already know everything you need to know about parathyroid hormone for the most part. There's one little detail that we've left out. So I'm going to erase some of this. So that we can plug in parathyroid hormone, all right? So now, for parathyroid hormone, often abbreviated, of course this marker is giving out on me, often abbreviated as PTH. And some books actually call it parathormone. They just take the thyroid part out and they call it parathormone. Parathyroid hormone or parathormone, PTH, the stimulus for its release is a low concentration of calcium in the blood. I always like to say that parathyroid hormone or PTH pumps calcium up. Calcitonin tones calcium down, parathyroid hormone pumps calcium up. If you say that 10 times, then you'll know the answers on the test for all of this information. Calcitonin tones calcium down, parathyroid hormone pumps calcium up. Remember that, and then you can plug all this in. The endocrine organ, well, the endocrine organ is going to be the parathyroid gland. And the cells of the parathyroid gland are called chief cells. Release PTH. Parathyroid hormone is going to target our bones and our kidneys. There are some other organs that get targeted, okay? And the response is it's going to increase our blood calcium concentration. At bones, what parathyroid hormone is going to do is it's going to increase what we call osteolysis. Or we can say it will increase osteoclast activity. Remember, when we studied bones, osteoclasts are the cells that are chipping away at bone and digesting the bone to release the calcium and the other salts in bone. So, osteolysis, the breakdown or lysis or digestion of bone, we digest the calcium salts, release it, and they flow out into our bloodstream, raising our calcium levels. At kidneys, it will decrease calcium loss in urine. So, we stop urinating out calcium. You don't stop urinating, but the amount of calcium lost in urine is less, so that we retain the calcium for our body because it was too low. But there's one other kicker on this one. It turns out that when we study these cells, one of the things we know is that calcitonin can decrease osteoblast activity or osteogenesis. So in bones, osteoblasts have receptors for calcitonin. It will make them work faster, so they build bone. But osteoblasts also have receptors for parathyroid hormone. And when parathyroid hormone binds to osteoblasts, they slow down and quit building bone. And the osteoclasts get busier releasing it so that we raise our blood calcium levels. Okay? So you should know all of that about parathyroid hormone. It's pretty quick and simple. You can write in the stimulus, write in the endocrine organ's name, write in the hormone, list the targets, list the responses. Okay? And in this case, you could also list the mechanism. Some people like to list. I'm a picture guy. Anyway, either way, I highly recommend you either draw this picture and copy it 50 times, or write this list and copy it 50 times. Take out a blank page, write calcitonin at the top, and do it. And then throw it away, do it again, do it again, do it again. Do it till you can't stand it, and do it 3 or 4 more times. Learn one hormone and one hormone only, then you learn the next hormone. Then you take out 2 pages and see if you can do the 2 hormones back to back. When you make a 90 or higher on that, then you do a 3rd hormone. So learn one hormone at a time, because we have 18 of these to learn. All right. So now, I'm going to check the time on my camera. Oh, I got plenty of time. So I'm going to keep moving on this video, and I'm going to do more of the simple endocrine pathways. Okay. Sorry, I'm doing this with a cell phone, and I'm not real technologically savvy. We're going to do erythropoietin and thymosin. So, same setup. Let me just erase all of this. And we're going to talk about some other hormones. I'm going to try to finish as many of these hormones as we can in one more video. And at the very end of all of this, I'm going to have a video where I do a review. I'm going to go over the review questions in my note set for all my students. Okay? Because there are some details we have not covered. Now, the next hormone on the list is called erythropoietin. We abbreviate it EPO. And that hormone, called erythropoietin, produces red blood cells. RBC stands for red blood cell. And if you don't know this, the true name of a red blood cell, the scientific term, is erythrocyte. Erythro refers to red, so they're red cells or red blood cells. So, erythropoietin produces erythrocytes. That's how you remember what it does. The stimulus for this is going to be a decreased blood volume, a decreased blood pressure, or decreased renal blood flow. Now, we haven't done the urinary system yet, and I think I'm out of it. These red lines are my edge of where y'all can see. So, as you know, our kidneys are cleaning and filtering our blood. We haven't done the urinary system, but as our cells take in nutrients and metabolize them for energy and protein synthesis, there's some waste and trash left over, just like a refinery. And that waste or trash has to go somewhere. Our kidneys take a lot of the trash and toxins out of our blood, put them in urine, and we pee them out. Now, in order to clean the blood, I have to have the blood flow into the kidneys. If blood flow into the kidneys slows, I don't filter my blood. The toxins in my blood build up, and we can undergo what's called sepsis. If you know what a septic tank is, that's where the word sepsis comes from. Your blood goes septic, meaning it's filled with trash and toxins, and they're poisoning your cells to death. Okay? So we need to maintain adequate blood flow to our kidneys to constantly clean our blood. If your blood volume is decreased, then the pressure of your blood in the system is decreased, which means the flow of blood to all your organs, particularly the kidneys, is going to be decreased. In response to that, the kidneys are going to release erythropoietin. The target is going to be red bone marrow. And in our bone marrow, the response is going to be to elevate our blood volume, to elevate the blood pressure, and to increase renal blood flow. The mechanism is to increase erythropoiesis. So in case you don't know this, in some of our bones, there's bone marrow. In the bone marrow are the cells that divide constantly by mitosis. They're stem cells. They're considered adult stem cells because they're in the adult body. But these stem cells can constantly divide and divide and divide, and every time they divide, they release a new red blood cell, or at least what's going to become a red blood cell. It's called a reticulocyte that develops into a red blood cell. So if my blood pressure and blood flow are low, renal blood flow and my blood volume, then if I increase my red blood cell supply, or the volume of red blood cells in my blood, it raises our overall blood volume. Here's the concept. If you take a glass of a substance, some liquid, let's say it's a glass of, I don't really want to use water, let's say it's a glass of syrup, doesn't matter. If I have a glass with some syrup in it, and I take a whole bunch of marbles, and I start to dump them into the glass, every time a marble enters the glass, that marble is going to push all the fluid in there around itself. So the more marbles I add, the more it raises the overall volume of fluid. It may not raise the volume of fluid, but it raises the overall volume. And the volume is consistent of these structures and these structures combined. So if I increase the red blood cell count, I increase my blood volume, I increase the blood pressure, which will restore renal blood flow. Make sense? I hope so. So now we understand erythropoietin. That's everything you need to know about it. Okay? Next hormone. And I forgot which hormone was next in my note set, so I'm going to take a quick peek at it. Pardon my back while I erase the board, but we got to clean it to make room. The next hormone is called the thymosins. I guess are wondering if you can guess where thymosins are secreted. There's a class of thymosins. They come from the thymus gland. Thymosins produce our immune system. They're responsible for the normal development of a healthy immune system. So the stimulus is, we're not really sure. Normal development. And I've even read in some instances when we have infections to things. The endocrine organ is going to be the thymic corpuscles, also called the Hassel's corpuscles of the thymus gland. We learned those in lab. They're called Hassel's corpuscles or thymic corpuscles. They will release thymosins. The target is going to be bone marrow again. The mechanism, the target is bone marrow. Sorry, I didn't do that very well. And I'm not going to waste a 20-minute video. Bone marrow. The response is to increase white blood cell count. Okay? Or what we call leukopoiesis. Now, leuco can be spelled with a K or a C. Originally, the term leukocyte, so it will increase leukocytes. I learned leukocytes with the K because a lot of the science was done over in Germany, and they used K. Now we're Americanizing and putting a C, but it will increase the leukocytes, or the number of white blood cells. The more white blood cells, the better you can fight an infection. That's your immune system. The mechanism, we're not really sure. You'll have to take immunology to get into that level of detail, which is an entire 16-week course in its own. And if you ever have to take immunology, I'm sorry. All right? I loved it, but it was tough. Anyway, that's it for thymosins. It's pretty straightforward. You know, if you get an infection or you're having normal development, the thymic corpuscles will release thymosins. They go to your bone marrow and cause you to produce white blood cells. That's all we're going to say about it. It's real simple. Now, I have enough time to do one more hormone. I think there's one more hormone on the list that's rather simple. And then we have one last one to do. Okay? We're done with all the hormones. Melatonin. I'm going to do this hormone on this video. I'm going to do the last video dedicated for the mineral corticoids all by itself. Okay? So this hormone we're going to do is melatonin. And again, I like these funny little sentences. Melatonin mellows you out. Melatonin is the sleep hormone. It makes you all chill so that you fall asleep. The stimulus is a decreased exposure to UV light. Darkness. If you're in a dark room, or you close your eyes and put a mask on, when there's less light hitting your retina, the retina not only sends axons back into the brain to the occipital lobe, but along the way, if you remember, let me show you this real quick. Here's the human brain. Here's the optic chiasm, the optic nerve from the eyeball. When light hits the retina, axons go through the optic tract all the way back here. But if you know where this is the thalamus in the brain, hanging off the back of the thalamus was a little gland called the pineal gland. And some of the axons go to the pineal gland. So the endocrine organ is the pineal gland of the brain. Or we can say the pinealocytes. I say pineal, some say pineal gland. Some people mistakenly ask me about the pineal gland, but that's in the reproductive system. It's not here. The pineal gland of the brain, the pinealocytes, they will release melatonin. The target is going to be the brain. The response is going to be to decrease awareness. You become drowsy and you fall asleep. Okay, we're not going to worry about a mechanism. Now, a lot of the hormones we're talking about can have other effects. For example, if I am going to get drowsy, that's sort of the parasympathetic response. So heart rate can go down, blood pressure can go down, breathing rate can go down. When we talked about cortisone in the last video, cortisone, or the video before that maybe, cortisone increases blood sugar levels so that we can have energy for stress. Well, if I'm going to have the energy, it's also going to raise blood pressure, raise heart rate, raise breathing rate, so that I can feed all that stuff into the little choo-choo train we drew back at the autonomic nervous system review, one of the very first videos in module 1 for lecture test 1. So you guys should know that I'm not giving you all the details. I'm giving you enough to understand these hormones. You should be able to extrapolate, read the chapter, and read the other effects of these hormones and know that they're there. But I want you to get to the heart of the matter, the meat of the matter, so that you understand the fundamentals of these hormones. Now, I hope you learned something. I hope you had as much fun as I did. And we got one more hormone to do, and then we're going to do a review, and we're done with all the endocrine lectures. See you on the flip side in the next lecture. Thanks for watching.